A very good morning to all the participants. Now we are going to start the third day program of online faculty development program on recent advances in biosimilars development. Today we will be having three sessions. Morning first session will be mine, followed by Dr. Srikanth Dana, who is a senior scientist from Orion Pharma, Finland, and followed by the post-lunch session by Dr. Satish Kumar Nanjappan, who will be talking on proteomics tools in biosimilar characterization. So first session is mine. I'm just sharing my presentation. So regarding my background, actually I did my bachelor's and master's in pharmacy and master's in pharmacology from Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, and worked as assistant professor in pharmacy colleges before moving to Japan to do my PhD and postdoctoral studies there in Niigata University of Pharmacy and Applied Life Sciences, Niigata, Japan, where I was majorly focusing on development of preclinical animal models for testing various inflammatory diseases and heart failure, where I worked on various natural products and food products for their beneficial effects against these inflammatory as well as diabetes and heart failure. This kind of preclinical testing of these food products and natural compounds where I was involved in these studies. Then I returned back to India as a Ramanujan Fellow and now working as an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacology, NIPER, Kolkata. So today my topic is biosimilars, preclinical testing and beyond. Like as we have seen for the past 2 days, there are many discussions happened on the biosimilar development of various analytical techniques which are necessary for characterization and study of these biosimilars. And I'll be focusing on the preclinical part. Along with that, some importance of biosimilars as well. So my content of this presentation will have like what are biosimilars and what are the importance of biosimilars, why we have to focus on biosimilars, and what are the steps or various processes involved in this development of biosimilars when comparing with the innovator biologics or biogeneric or generic small molecules. What is the major difference between this development processes between these three different kinds of drugs, like small molecule generics and innovator biologics and then biosimilars, how these different regulations involved in these different products, and how we'll be doing the analytical characterization as well as in vitro and in vivo studies for testing the properties or functions of these biosimilars in comparison with the innovator biologics. This preclinical testing and the FDA's totality of evidence, what is its importance, and followed by some clinical indications of biosimilars and pharmacovigilance and its importance. All this brief information I'll be discussing in this presentation. As we already seen by many experts, I already explained the definition of biosimilars. Just for introduction, a biosimilar is essentially the same as the reference biologic medicine with some natural variations. If you see that generics in compare with small molecules, like they will be, the structure is almost same, is exactly the same, but so we can expect the pharmacological effect also same because of the changes or modifications in the other things which are added, like the additional things which are adding into that formulation. So that may cause some variations in their pharmacokinetics as well as pharmacodynamic properties that we'll be doing bioequivalent studies. But for here, these biosimilars, they are essentially same, but they have some natural variations, because we all know this biological products or biosimilars, they are developed by living cells or organisms. So naturally there will be some variations if you use different kinds of vectors or the host cell. Depends on the type of host cell or vector, the product will also have some minute quantities of those things, and the structure also vary depending on vector. So that's why it is naturally it will have some variations with the innovator biologics. Like we are following some reference molecules and studying their characteristics to develop our own biosimilars. So, but we think it should be similar, but it will not be the case. Like it will be having some variations. If you see the definition by WHO, so this is in WHO they call it as similar biology product. As already other speakers also explained different nomenclature of biosimilars in different countries. Like this WHO it call it as similar biologic product, where a biotherapeutic product which is similar in terms of quality, safety and efficacy to an already licensed reference biotherapeutic product. So this is the definition by WHO. Whereas US FDA, how it defines follow-on biologic, it's also another term for biosimilars, a biological product that is highly similar to a US licensed reference biological molecule with no clinically meaningful differences in terms of the safety, purity and potency. You see, they are focusing on the products which are already licensed in USA. So that they have to follow for their biosimilars. And if you come to the characteristics of these biosimilars, this FDA approved biosimilars have been compared with FDA approved biologic known as a reference product. So these biosimilars always we have to compare with a reference product, where the reference and biosimilar products are complex large molecules. You know, all are proteins and monoclonal antibodies or hormones and peptides. So these all having huge amino acid sequence, a large molecule, complex in structure, and they are derived from living organism, and they are carefully monitored to ensure equality. So the similarity between the innovator biologics and biosimilars, they are carefully monitored for their quality. And a biosimilar is highly similar to a reference product. The structure and function of a biosimilar were compared to a reference product, looking at key characteristics like the purity. It should match the purity similar as that of innovator biologic or reference biologic. And the molecular structure, it should be highly similar, not exactly the same, but it should be highly similar. And also the bioactivity, it should be highly similar to the reference biology. And a biosimilar has no clinical difference from a reference product. A biosimilar is comparable to the reference in terms of safety, purity, potency. As already we discussed, there is no clinical difference, which is ensured by various evidences like pharmacokinetic, and if needed pharmacodynamic studies has to be performed, and immunogenicity assessment has to be done. This is major than most important study, because most of these biological products, they are immunogenic in nature, and if it is given in to any kind of patients, they are more prone for developing antibodies against these biological products. So this proper testing of this for this immunogenicity is essential, and additional clinical studies also needed to compare the innovator biologic with our biosimilar to prove that there is no clinical difference between these two products. And the biosimilar is approved by FDA after rigorous evaluation and testing by the applicant. So here the patients and prescribers should be able to use biosimilars instead of reference products without any concern. So we are just substituting this biosimilar with innovator biologics. So they should have some confidence in selecting this choosing this biosimilar without any concern, because biosimilars are always they are meeting the FDA's rigorous standards for approval, and they are manufactured in FDA licensed facilities, and also they are tracked as part of post-marketing surveillance to ensure continued safety. So these all things are rigorously monitored. That's why the patients and prescribers can choose this biosimilar instead of the reference products without any concern. And if you see in this image, you can consider these biological products like snowflakes. Like you can see all these different snowflakes are with different structures, but minor changes in their structures. You compare that antibodies are the protein products in the top. So the similar to snowflakes, biosimilars are different from different manufacturers, differ from their originator biological molecule medicines from each other. But we expect that the biological or the clinical efficacy should be same when compared with this original biologic. So these biosimilars are nothing new. It started in 2000 in India. Like the initially approved biosimilar in India is Biovac B, that is hepatitis B vaccine. And in 2006, where European Medicines Agency approved this Omnitrope, which is somatotropin. This somatotropin is a growth hormone, right? You know, this human growth hormone secreted by pituitary gland, where this a similar kind of molecule which is produced by recombinant DNA technology, which is used in treatment of growth deficiency in children, like Turner syndrome or Prader-Willi syndrome, like some kind of syndromes where this growth hormone secretion is less. So there, the prescription-based medicine, this biosimilar Omnitrope is prescribed, and it is approved in 2006 by EMA. And similarly, this filgrastim. So the filgrastim is colony stimulating factor. That is, it is also used in case of low WBC count. So this molecule is also approved in US FDA 2015. So these are the first biosimilar molecules which are approved in different countries, and you see the different years how the progress have been made in biosimilar inclusion, like release of these biosimilars. In 2005, you can see biosimilar human growth hormone is approved in European Union in 2006, whereas in Australia it is in 2005, whereas erythropoietin of biosimilar erythropoietin is approved in European Union in 2007, whereas US human growth hormone approval. This is in 2007. You know, this 2006 is the first. 2015 is the first US FDA approved biosimilar, but this growth hormone with a different application process were already approved in USA in 2007, but it's not coming under biosimilar category, but still it is a biological product which is prepared in comparison or in similarity with the innovator biologic. And similarly, till 2017, we have this graph showing different biologics which are approved in different countries. And why we have to focus this biosimilars? Because of its accelerated growth. You can see there are more than 300 monoclonal antibodies and more than 250 vaccines and more than 100 other biologics, including cell and gene therapies, are currently in clinical development. And the global biologic market is expected to reach around 291 billion US dollars in 2020. That is old data, but still in 2022, you can expect 50% of the pharmaceutical market share is expected to be in biologics. So you can see the potential what this biosimilar is having in the pharmaceutical market. And it is expected that by 2030, the biosimilar market will be a greater than a 240 billion opportunity as patents on major biologics continue to expire. So we all know that innovator biologics, if the patent is expired, it is having the huge opportunity to develop this biosimilar. So most of the innovator biologics which are developed before, now they will become their patent will get expired, so that others can utilize this opportunity to develop this biologics, that is biosimilars, and its market potential is huge. So those who are studying masters or any kind of life sciences courses that involving in biological research, so there is a huge opportunity if they develop the techniques or the analytical techniques which are used in biosimilars development. So they will have a huge job opportunity in this field. And why biosimilars? So biologic therapeutics in multiple fields have revolutionized the treatment for autoimmune, autoinflammatory, and cancer, because we know all these disorders, they don't have proper therapy. So these biologic therapeutics are much more given focus, and it has revolutionized the therapy of these disorders. And they are, we know the biosimilars are expensive, even though it is less expensive than the innovator biologics, but still these molecules are expensive. Like if you say drugs for rheumatoid arthritis cost most $50,000 a year, so this is not affordable by any Indian patient. So these costs have increased progressively. Cost of that is TNF interfering drugs have doubled since their introduction. See, this biosimilar or this biologic products cost also increasing year by year. And this biosimilar TNF interference therapy in Norway in 2014 led to a nearly 60% annual saving. See, you know, the biosimilar also involved in reduction in the annual saving, but still when compared with small molecules, these biosimilars are having huge cost for the therapy. And it estimates the cost of saving, that is more than 66 billion US dollars over the next decade. That is 4% of total biologics value is going to be as a saving in the over the next decade. That is the importance of this biologics, which is bringing the cost reduction in other biologics, innovator biologic products, because their cost is huge. We cannot even afford those medicines. But this biosimilars, and if we focus like Indian companies, if they focus on indigenous vectors or any kind of cell techniques and analytical tools which are developed in India, then we can expect there will be a huge reduction in the cost of these biosimilars. That's why we should focus on our students and our research has to improve to utilize the indigenous materials or indigenous biosimilars, that thereby we can reduce the cost. And if you see, there are other terms which can be confusing with this biosimilars. Is the second generation or biobetter and generic drugs. You see, biobetter, it is like the innovator biologics. These biobetter are similar kind of molecules, but having different structure, and they are developed to improve the efficacy, or should be to make the molecule better than the innovator biologics, like the structurally different from originally licensed biopharmaceutical, intended to improve performance while preserving the mechanism of action. Like examples, infliximab and adalimumab. These two are different, having different structures, but their mechanism of action is same. But they are proposing that this biobetter should have a better efficacy and better performance when compared with the first generation innovator biologics. Similarly, the filgrastim and pegfilgrastim, this pegylated filgrastim derivatives. This filgrastim, it is having a lesser T-off half-life because of its excretion by kidneys. The mode of excretion, that pharmacokinetics, because of that, the half-life is less. So we have to give more doses, or multiple injections are required for this filgrastim. But if you see this biobetter pegylated, that is polyethylene glycol complex of this filgrastim, it is excreted by a different mechanism. So the kinetic behavior is different. It's increasing the half-life, so that the injection duration, number of injections can be decreased. If you see the cost of this drug, and if you administer as a once daily, or like if you reduce the number of doses, the cost also will come down to the patients. So the patients will get benefit, and also like cost reduction, as well as suffering of the patient will also be reduced, and the patient adherence to the therapy also will increase because of these biobetters. And they are not considered to be biosimilars. There is a major difference between biobetter and innovator biologics or biosimilars. And one more is generic drugs. These are small molecule drugs that are less complex than biosimilars. Manufacturing process several orders of magnitude less complex, because these are small molecules of known structure. So that's why this manufacturing process is less cumbersome, and they are regulated under different legislation. This all the application process and everything is different when compared with this biologics. And what is the major difference between this chemical generics and biologics or biosimilars? You see the small molecules, example, this acetyl salicylic acid. This aspirin is having molecular weight of 180 Dalton. In compare with the insulin, it is having 5,700 Daltons, even though it is smaller. But if you see other hormones like growth hormones, having 191 amino acids and 22,000 Daltons approximately the molecular weight, which is when compared with this monoclonal antibodies, very huge molecules. They're having this almost 1,300 amino acids with 150,000 Daltons, or 150 kilodaltons. This huge size. That's why they are heavier, larger in size, and difficult to define their structure. So the complexity is increasing. This is a major difference between this chemical generics and biosimilars. And what is the difference in manufacture of these biosimilars and generics. You see, small molecule generics, they are low molecular weight and complexity is less, whereas biosimilars high molecular weight and they're having complex three-dimensional structure. Whereas this is done by chemical synthesis, but these are produced by living organisms, and using some recombinant DNA technology, will be producing this by using living organisms or cells. And manufacturing process is easy to reverse engineer, whereas the manufacturing process cannot be replicated. That's why this biosimilars manufacturing process involves different changes, leading to different changes in the efficacy of the molecule. That's why this analytical characterization of this biosimilar is playing a major role in this discovery of this biosimilars. This small molecules identical copy of active ingredient, the same molecule structure, whereas this biosimilar, although required to contain the same primary amino acid sequence, the biosimilar is not identical to the originator but rather highly similar. So how we'll make the different processes in the to make the product is like which gene is involved in producing the particular therapeutic protein. So example, if it is a insulin or a growth hormone or anything which is produced by human, that is, we have to make them in vitro or in the cell lines or in the by other living organisms. So we have to get the required gene or the representative gene, and we have to clone into the DNA vector, and this vector we have to transfer into the host cell. This may be a bacterial or mammalian cell which produces this protein. Now, because it is the DNA is incorporated in the cells, these cells can produce this biological product, and using fermentation of different capacity based on the requirement, different huge fermenter can be used to produce these proteins, and they will be further purified and characterized, and it is formulated into the required product. So this is how this biosimilar is manufactured. And this clinical development process for biosimilar is highly stringent. You see, the small molecules, their proof of quality and bioequivalence is a major thing, and no substantial clinical data is required because the structure is same, and already we have all the clinical data for this small molecule, and no substantial clinical data is required for this generics. Whereas reference to originators, we can always refer this originators data, so it is not required to duplicate all this data with our generics. But if you see this biosimilars or biological medicine, because they have different manufacturing processes which can and often yield differences in the end product, and after the quality of a biological medicine is demonstrated, some non-clinical and clinical studies are necessary. First thing is we have to demonstrate the quality, then clinical studies are necessary, and non-clinical studies also necessary, and this in vivo studies, if required, it has to be performed. And the major thing is immunogenic response cannot be predicted, even though we can predict using some in silico or computational techniques, but still complete immunological response cannot be ruled before doing any kind of cell line studies or animal preclinical or clinical studies to test the immunogenic response. This is the substantial difference between the development process between the small molecules and biological products. And what are the issues of concern for biosimilars? Safe efficacy issues, like we know there's a difference between the bioactivity of the biosimilars and their innovator products. Example is there are 11 epoetin, that is erythropoietin biosimilars products from 4 different countries: Korea, Argentina, China, and India. So all these products are not always uniform in producing the similar bioactivity. This is a major issue. This is an efficacy issues. Another example is by study comparing quality parameters carried out on 3 different biopharmaceuticals like pegylated GCSF, granulocyte colony stimulating factor, and erythropoietin. This pegylated, non-pegylated, and erythropoietin from 16 different brands. If you do the comparative quality assessment, and they showed a lack of comparability with reference product and significant differences in the purity levels. There is a major issue in the efficacy related to this biosimilars. You see, safety issues like concerns regarding immunogenicity. You see, if there is a minor change in any kind of additives, that can also lead to increased immunogenic response that will eventually leading to withdrawal or stoppage of the further studies, like increased cases of pure red cell aplasia. This is where the bone marrow effect of this drug product leading to only reduction in the red cell count. It is not affecting the WBCs and thrombocytes, whereas the bone marrow cannot produce this red blood cells. Erythroblast counts are decreasing because of this effect of this drugs. Example with this epoetin alpha, this EPREX, is caused by production of neutralizing antibodies against endogenous epoetin. So the body produces these neutralizing antibodies that will affect the efficacy of this epoetin. And because of the subtle change in the manufacture, where the human albumin stabilizer was replaced by polysorbate 80. So this polysorbate 80 was the culprit behind this increased cases of this pure red cell aplasia associated with this epoetin alpha, leading to increased immunogenicity. These are the safety issues which are related to this biosimilars. And another thing is pharmacovigilance. See, there are a limited clinical database at the time of approval because post-marketing surveillance is playing a major role in identifying other adverse events where vigorous pharmacovigilance is required. And immunogenicity is a unique safety issue. Like if you are performing studies and clinical trials in a particular region or in a particular kind of group of patients, and then for post-marketing, if it reaches to a different ethnic or region of patients, they're having some specific allergic response. So those also can be identified using this pharmacovigilance studies, which should be highly vigorous and extensive. And this adverse drug reaction monitoring data should be exhaustive. All these things are playing major role in pharmacovigilance. And what are the regulations for proper monitoring of this biosimilars? If you see the US approval pathways for small molecules versus biologics, the small molecules approved by via this FDCA, where these small molecules and their generics. The application process is 505 B1 and B2. And here you see full report of safety and efficacy investigations and done by these two pathways based on right of reference. Whereas generics, it is ANDA, that is abbreviated new drug applications by 505J, where identical to an already approved product. So that's why it is generic, right? We are proving it is identical and no safety efficacy data is required. Only bioequivalence data is required. But if you see the biologics approved by PHSA, where this biologic license application 351A, this is required, whereas biosimilars, it is done by 351K, where a full report of safety and efficacy similar to this small molecules, but here we have to give highly similar to 351A product, this one, but we have to show highly similar. That's why this all analytical parameters and non-clinical parameters and clinical parameters play essential role in this thing. And this applicant has the right of reference to essential investigations. The data showing absence of clinically meaningful difference, the difference between this 351A and 351K. And this biosimilar approval pathways in different countries, we can compare what is the difference between this approval pathways in European Union and Australia, USA and Japan. And in next slide, we will see about India and other countries. So here, whether the biosimilar pathway status, whether it is already established or not. So you can see in these countries, it is already well established. And the clinical trials, whether it's mandatory or not, here, European Union and Australia, they are mandatory, but extend how much extent we have to do, that is negotiable by the applicant. And here also it is same, but in Japan, phase 1 studies are mandatory, where phase 2 studies may be abbreviated in some situations. This is the mandatory requirement for clinical trials. And for reference medicine, both biosimilar and originator must have the same mechanism of action. Here, reference must be marketed in the European Union and Australia, although European Union guidelines indicate that from foreign reference can also be acceptable. This is also same. It should be marketed in USA, but it can also be acceptable if it is marketed in some foreign countries also. And in Japan, you see, reference must be approved and marketed in Japan only. So this is the major difference between the reference medicine selection. And formulation, same strength and route of administration, otherwise further studies are required. Here also same strength and route of administration and same. And post-marketing safety surveillance, we say it is also mandatory along with risk management plan in the post-marketing surveillance, that is pharmacovigilance. Here, it should be tailored to the particular safety and effectiveness concerns associated with the reference medicine. Here, we have to take the safety issues related to the reference medicine, and the similar kind of things we have to include for this biosimilars in the post-marketing surveillance. And here the plan must be created to trace adverse events, and a drug safety report should be submitted. This is the difference in the post-marketing safety surveillance. And equivalence margins, like currently it is not defined, but it is expected that equivalence margins will be predefined by the sponsor along with a strong scientific justification prior to conduct of clinical trials. This has to be done, and it is also almost similar in USA. And while we are extrapolating this biosimilar to other indications, so if it is done for a particular indication, but if you want to extrapolate into other indications, it will be permitted providing the mechanism of action is the same as the reference, but scientific justifications are required for this extrapolation. Here also it is almost similar. Scientific justification for extrapolation is required even if the biosimilar and reference have the same mechanism of action. Here if it is same, then only justification if required, then only we have to provide. But here if it is having the same mechanism of action also, we have to justify like relevant target receptors for each indication. If an indication is different, the receptor target may be different, so there we have to provide the data and pattern of molecular signaling upon receptor binding. Once the molecule binds to the receptor, what kind of signaling events which are altered by this biologics, that has to be provided. The data has to be provided. And similarly, expression and location of the target receptors, relevance of pharmacodynamic measures to mechanism of action, relevance of pharmacokinetic values in different patient populations, differences seen in toxicities for the various conditions of use and in various patient populations. So these are all the data which are required if we want to extrapolate to other indications. And interchangeability, so it has to be taken in the country level decision. And if you compare all these parameters in Canada, South Korea, and China, and with India, see these biosimilar pathway studies are here also it is well established, but in China you can see no pathway. So copy biological medicines approved as new drugs. This is the difference between other countries and China. And if you see clinical trials, it is mandatory in Canada, but extent negotiable. Similar here in South Korea, phase 1 studies mandatory, phase 3 studies may have abbreviated in some situations. Here in India also phase 1, phase 3 trials are mandatory. It is also similar in China with the reference not marketed in China, because we know it is there is no biosimilar pathway in China, so they have to follow from other countries. And reference medicines, how we will be selecting the reference medicine. In India, you can see the reference should be approved and marketed in India, although some flexibility is allowed if reference is not marketed in India. And you can see in China it is not defined, and many of the things are not defined in Chinese pathway for application. And if you see the importance of biosimilar development process, we know this product developed is having from the origin of the DNA, that is known DNA sequence, and it is having unique manufacturing process and which develops a unique biologics. So each individual biosimilar is having their uniqueness. That's why understanding the biosimilar development process allows the prescribers to make informed decisions about the potential utility of biosimilar as a treatment option. That's why if the process is different, that they may expect some kind of adverse reactions or some kind of immunogenic responses. That's why if it is known to the prescribers, they will be choosing wisely. And how these biosimilars are developed, like the key requirements for comparability is high similar structure and function. So some same primary structure of amino acid sequence with the innovator biologics, and similar high order structure. So not only the primary structure, but high order structure like 3-dimensional or quaternary structure also it should be similar and high quality, and it should have the same biological functions. And also we have to prove that equivalent in pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic parameters, and it should have comparable clinical efficacy and safety, and the same presentation, that is dose and administration mode. It should be same with the innovator biologics and biosimilars. If you see the pyramid of development process and what is the difference between the development between the originator drug and biosimilars. You know that innovator biologics, where we are developing some biological products and their characterization is important, but still its clinical efficacy and other parameters are playing a major role, because it is a initial product and their efficacy is more important and their adverse effects and all these things are playing a major role. But if you want to develop a biosimilar which is comparable or similar to originator drug, then we have to prove that this function, structure, function, impurities and everything are similar to this structure, similar to this product. That's why this analytical phase is playing a major role. We have to perform thorough analytical testing when compared with the originator drug, where it is having a least role than other phases. But this clinical study only for a comparison equivalence. So clinical phase is bit less when compared with originator drug. This is the pyramid, like this is inverted pyramid and this is a normal pyramid. And then what is the contrast in development approach? Like see generics, because the known small molecules are developed already and we are following the same data. So generic development is having the least time in process, like time to market is only 2 to 3 years, whereas new biologics it will 8 to 10 years, even sometimes it can go up to 15 years. And the biosimilars is almost half or less than that. New biologics it's 7 to 8 years. But if you compare with generics, biosimilars require much more time. That's why biosimilars are closer to originators in development approach compared to generics. Where this clinical studies, what are the requirements? Like only bioequivalent studies in healthy volunteers, where here we need phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 efficacy and safety studies. And here in biosimilars, comparative phase 1, pharmacokinetic, and phase 3, where phase 2 is not required because small patients, a small group of patients is not required. It will be directly doing in a large population. And the number of patients also, it is only 2 to 50, whereas new biologics 800 to 1000. And if you compare with this, biosimilars having less number of patients. And post-approval activities like pharmacovigilance, risk management plan, and in special situations is required. Whereas in new biologics, phase 4, it is extensive risk management plan, including pharmacovigilance. Here also it is extensive. So if you see that drug development comparison, so new medicine, what are the different process, like drug discovery first, early, and development, non-clinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This is how it is following. But if you see biosimilars, you see this analytical, non-clinical, clinical pharmacology, that is PK/PD, and clinical studies. It is costing almost more than 100 million USD, and time taken is approximately 5 to 9 years. But if you see small molecules, it is having least time, only 2 years, where you'll be doing only analytical and bioequivalent studies. So this is a major difference. And if you come to biosimilars testing, like how it is being done. So initial thing is the development of this product, and we have to study the characterize them with the amino acid sequence, then the protein structure, that is alpha helix and beta sheet. Then we'll be characterizing all this protein analytical techniques. Using these analytical techniques, we'll be characterizing the proteins. Then we'll be testing in vitro using some functional assays, maybe cell proliferation assay or immunogenicity assay. There are many different assays which can be done for its characterization in vitro, followed by preclinical trials. But it may not be required in every case, but if it is required, it has to be provided in preclinical trials and safety and toxicological studies, followed by human clinical trials. And what are the major goals? It is to establish similarity of to the reference product. How it is develop high similar products with technical development include fully characterize the reference product first. Before starting with our biosimilar, we have to characterize the reference product, and we have to match the molecular profile of biosimilar with the reference product, either structure, function, or biological activity. Then match final dosage form to the reference product, and then confirm the biosimilarity using preclinical phase 1 and phase 3. So where we have to demonstrate the PK/PD equivalence, confirm efficacy and safety via tailored phase 3 studies, and we have to support extrapolation to non-studied indications and interchangeability. This is also one important parameter in confirming the biosimilarity. And post-approval phase 4 registries with additional data following the product long term. This is the major goal. And in stepwise approach, if you see, In preclinical, we'll be doing in vitro studies to assess binding to the targets. If it is a specific target like TNF alpha interfering agents, we have to study its binding to the specific targets, and we have to assess the signal transduction and functional activity and viability. This is a major thing. We'll be focusing using some cell-based assays or in vitro enzyme binding assays or target protein interaction studies. We'll be doing this in vitro studies and then followed by in vivo studies, and we have to determine whether these in vivo studies are required or not. Like necessary only if factors of concern identified. Example, new post-translational modification structures. Like if you compare with the innovator biologics, if you are producing this similar kind of product in another vector and another system, then we can expect there may be some chances of post-translational modifications like sialation, smolation, any kind of post-translational modification. That if it is there, then we have to perform this in vivo studies focusing on the dependence, like what is required, need for the additional information. So based on the need for additional information, we'll be doing this in vivo studies. If not, then we'll be directly going to the PK, pharmacokinetic and dynamic studies, where we'll be doing single dose crossover or parallel group design are preferred. So crossover is like the same population will be doing with after some time we'll be giving the another treatment regimen, whereas the parallel is two different groups will be given a different kind of two different treatment schedule regimens. And PD markers selected on the basis of their clinical relevance, and affinity is the key determinant of the pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic profile of monoclonal antibodies and soluble receptor constructs. And a close reproduction of conformational structure for biosimilar monoclonal antibodies and soluble receptor constructs is needed to ensure comparable biological effects, and which is followed by phase 3, where we'll be doing the safety and efficacy studies. There are no clinically significant difference in efficacy to the reference product. This is a major aim of this phase 3 studies, and compare severity and frequency of adverse events, in particular for immunogenicity. This is the also a major aim of this phase 3 clinical study. And this is a product of reverse engineering. What we say, this reverse pharmacology, for example, if you say if you know the target of a particular disease, example a particular protein or particular receptor, then we will be making a molecule, small molecule, and we'll be testing it with different in vitro, in vivo and clinical studies to study its effect in modifying the disease condition. That is a normal pharmacology. But where reverse pharmacology is like where you know some molecule or something which is known to be effective or having some therapeutic benefit in a disease, and then we will be treating it and then identifying what are the changes it induces. Thereby you will be studying or getting some novel targets also. That kind of studies are reverse pharmacology. Here it is a case like reverse engineering, where you know already there is a product which is having a pharmacological effect in some kind of disease. This is a innovator biologic, where you are characterizing it and identifying what are the critical quality attributes which are there with this molecule, and you are developing a unique cell line and manufacturing process that will produce a similar kind of biological molecule, and then you have to characterize these developed biosimilars, and you have to identify and list out their critical quality attributes, and then you have to compare, like evaluate similarity to the reference product. This is the reverse engineering process, where we have a reference. Based on that, we are developing the biosimilars. And what are the principle behind demonstrating the biosimilarity? Here you know that selection of the reference drug, that is most important. Like clinical efficacy and safety of reference biopharmaceutical have already been demonstrated. So we have to list out all the properties and clinical efficacy, safety, everything related to that reference drug. Then biosimilar must demonstrate no significant difference from its reference product, like robust analytical, toxicological, PK/PD and immunogenicity studies in comparison to the reference product, and smaller comparative effectiveness clinical trials conducted in patients in a disease for which the reference product is licensed. So this clinical part is bit less, whereas this analytical part is huge. And no need to demonstrate efficacy in all the indications. That is one more thing. And here no difference in safety or efficacy are expected between an approved biosimilar and its reference product. And we are discussing like various analytical tools which are necessary or which are used in the analysis of the molecule. where you see biosimilar candidate, there you have to study the primary structure, amino acid sequence or peptide mapping that can be done using liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, using intact mass peptide mapping, and also LCMS subunit mapping. So these kind of primary structure characterization can be done using mass spectrometry. And high order structure like tertiary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary structures with the help of NMR, CD spectroscopy, and FTIR. And biological activity testing can be done using binding assays, like binding assays, then ADCC assays, and complement reactions like immunity related assays like ADCC and CDC. And impurities, how we'll be assessing the quality of the product using this impurity profiling, like ion exchange, cation exchange chromatography, then various acidic and basic variants, peptide mapping, mutation, oxidation, deamidation, glycation, and size exclusion chromatography, and analytical ultracentrifugation for studying the aggregation pattern. And yesterday also there was a discussion relating this aggregation, how it is related to producing higher immune responses. So immunogenicity related to aggregation, and LC is used to glycation. So this kind of PTM, post-translation modifications, also can be an impurity in the product which you are developing. So these things are necessary in impurity profiling. And this post-translation modification, as I said, we have different techniques like normal phase HPLC related with connected with MS, where we'll be studying the glycan profiling, then anion exchange chromatography, and MALDI-TOF. This kind of LCMS interface, which is used in kind of a protein estimation analysis, where this post-translation modifications can be studied, and various other techniques for post-translational modifications. And this mathematical algorithm, so that is also playing a major role. This multivariate data analysis, that is MVDA, where the different expression, gene expression and protein expression profiling can be performed. And if we come to the preclinical studies, where comparative, they should be comparative in nature and designed to detect the differences between the original reference molecule and the biosimilar, where the study design depends on the therapeutic index and indications applied. So which indication it is necessary, there the development of a suitable clinical model is, preclinical model is also necessary, and also based on its therapeutic index, where the dose fixation, everything is done. And it should be conducted with the final formulation, because we are testing the efficacy as a whole of the final product. That's why the excipients also may play a major role in the final efficacy. That's why it has to be conducted in the final formulation, and the dosage form, strength, and route of administration, everything should be same as that of reference drug. And what are the different approval process required for these studies? This is modified proteins, right? So these kind of things, we need institutional biosafety committee approval, as well as institutional animal ethics committee approval to carry out these kind of preclinical studies. And what are the studies we'll be doing in this preclinical evaluation? So pharmacodynamic, toxicological, and immune response in animals. You know that in vitro studies, in pharmacodynamics, both in vitro and in vivo can be done. In vitro cell-based assays, example is cell proliferation assays, and receptor binding assays can be done to characterize or to study the efficacy of the developed protein product using a particular cell line, where it is representing the clinical condition or the therapeutic indication. And in vivo studies, actually if in vitro studies are not reflecting the pharmacodynamics, then only we'll be going for in vivo studies. In recent times, these in vivo studies are not required for applying for this kind of biosimilars. Only if required, you will be doing this kind of in vivo studies. And these toxicological studies, at least one repeat dose toxicity study in a relevant species is required to be conducted. So this relevant species, sometimes if it is only a non-human primate kind of monkeys, then sometimes it is also not necessary, because it is always will be conducting studies on human. So that's why these toxicological studies after preliminary approval is not required to be conducted in non-human primates. And other toxicological studies like reproductive toxicity, mutagenicity, and all those things are usually not required for this preclinical evaluation of these biosimilars. And immune response in animals, this also sometimes the response produced by animals may not be similar as that of humans, but still if required, the sera samples are tested for reaction against the host cell proteins. So this is kind of immune response study, and these immune complexes in target tissues are also evaluated by histopathology. So after binding and in the cells, if they make any complexes, that can be evaluated using the finally collected tissue and histopathological studies. And if you see that non-clinical studies to meet the EMA guidelines, what are required? If we see the traditional path, how it is done is to establish the in vivo comparability of toxicokinetics and immunogenicity using a relevant animal species, generally the primates. This is the toxicokinetic and immunogenicity study. And here the dose reference product and biosimilar should be same, and we have to make head-to-head comparison. It's not like doing only the biosimilar. We have to do for both the reference molecule as well as the biosimilar, and we have to do head-to-head comparison. And here a single repeat dose and 4 dosing cycles per study are as per clinical dosing regimen. You have to compare how the dosing is done for the innovator biology, and then we have to follow the dosing regimen in our non-clinical studies. And you see, if half-life is 2 to 4 days, then we can do weekly dosing cycle. And if the half-life is 2 to 3 weeks, then we can go for monthly dosing cycle. And one dose level, one gender, and no recovery group may be acceptable, but it has to be justified. Like recovery group, always in any kind of toxicological studies, you will be adding one group where after completion of the study, we will be keeping the animal without the treatment. That is, we will be seeing how it is recovering from the treatment or effect produced by the drug. So this kind of recovery group may not be required, or if you are not adding, you have to justify it, why it is not necessary. If it cannot be justified, then we have to take the minimum dose levels, that is high dose, low dose, and control. We have to add a mid dose also. And here I will be doing 3 animals per sex and per dose level for the necropsy to check the individual organ effect of the drug, and plus 2 animals per sex for recovery group. So if the reference product didn't have a recovery group, then the biosimilar need not have a recovery group. This is also similar to that of innovator biology. And we have to perform a standard battery of health assessments like autonomic functions and behavioral functions, and like many other parameters. We have to check this standard battery of testing. Then we have to also perform toxicokinetic measurements after first dose and the last dose. And we have to perform immunogenicity testing after the last dose. And other non-clinical studies such as safety pharmacology, reproductive toxicology, mutagenicity, and carcinogenicity, which are always not required for these non-clinical studies related to biosimilars. And in India, if you see pharmacodynamic and toxicology studies, the preclinical studies should be conducted prior to the initiation of any clinical studies. This still in India, it is followed. You have to perform the preclinical studies in animal models. But these preclinical studies should be comparative in nature and designed to detect differences, if any, between the similar biologic and the reference biology. That's how we have to design the preclinical study. And similarly, as I said, dosage form, dose, strength, and route of administration should be same as that of reference biologic. And if you are following anything different, then we have to justify it. On pharmacodynamic studies, in vitro comparability of similar biologic and reference biologics should be established by in vitro cell-based assays. These assays already mentioned, and in vivo studies include so in vivo evaluation actually may be dispensable if in vitro assays are available. So that's what I already said. This in vitro, if it is proper, then we don't need to do in vivo. But if it is not representing exact indication, then we have to go with the in vivo studies. And toxicology studies, so at least one dose, one repeated dose toxicity study we have to perform. And this antibody response, that is immune response, that I think yesterday it is well explained by Dr. Ravi Krovidi and his team. But here I am just showing this image to represent how it is. It the basic mechanism behind the principle behind this test. The antibody responds to the similar biologic should be compared to that generated by the reference biologic in a suitable animal model, and we will be collecting the serum and we will be analyzing for testing for its reaction to the host protein, where we will be immobilizing the biologic, then we will be adding this serum where this is, if it is developed, if the animal develops any immune response against this biologic, then it will develop anti-drug antibodies. So these antibodies, if they are there, they will bind to this immobilized biologic. Then this any labeled antibody can be added, or labeled biologic that can be added, that will give readout as either fluorescence or colorimetry or any kind of even if it is a radio labeled biologic, then we can measure the radioactivity. This is how we will be estimating the immune response in the animals. Like we can use ELISA, bridging ELISA, or ECL method, enhanced chemiluminescence, or radioimmunoassay, where radio labeled biological antibodies are used as a secondary antibody to check the concentration of this primary antibody. That is where the neutralizing or anti-drug antibodies. Even that surface plasma resonance, this is SPR technique also can be utilized to check the immune response. These are very essential for any kind of biosimilars. And other toxicity studies are mostly not required. Then based on the successful evaluation of preclinical study reports, including demonstration of consistency of the process and product characterization, product specifications, and comparison of the similar biologic to the reference biologic, this RCGM, that they will recommend the DCG to allow the sponsor to conduct appropriate phase of clinical trials as per the CD score requirements. This is what being done in the Indian drug approval. So if you see a case study where this comparison between adalimumab and baricitinib, this is a small molecule baricitinib. The treatment of rheumatoid arthritis achieved by both these drugs, adalimumab and baricitinib, is one of such common grounds. See, this is a trade name Humira, is a biologic, while this baricitinib is a small molecule, and both are efficacious against this rheumatoid arthritis. But if you see this this biologic product, they're having huge cost, and this AbbVie, which is developed this adalimumab, and Lilly developed this baricitinib. The biologic manufacturer only keeps increasing their commercial wealth at the expense of a wider scope of impact in terms of access by the general patient population. Like general patients, they cannot afford to this kind of medicine, but still their cost is more. Those who can afford, so they can buy this medicine, and the wealth of this company is growing, therefore majorly focusing on that. But if you see the small molecules, the small molecule manufacturer tends to impact more on patients, this being the original goal, and not by a lower price drug, most often in order to survive in the drug business, where the cost is less, so more patients will be using it. So this is the major focus on this small molecules. This is a major difference between these two things, that is, one is biologic as well as small molecules. Clearly, manufacturers of both drug types, especially those of biologics, must commit or recommit to prioritizing the potential impact on patient population that their drug could achieve. So these are all preclinical studies, and one or two slides I'm just giving a brief about clinical studies. So here I'll be doing pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, confirmatory safety and efficacy studies, immunogenicity data, and extrapolation of safety data to other indications and market authorization. This is the process for clinical studies. Here the trial population must be sensitive and homogeneous. Sensitive in the sense, sensitive populations should have active disease, and the large effect size, like the drug effect must be large, and they should have immunocompetence, and it is easy to determine the effect of the drug if it is the patient is sensitive. Then homogeneous in the sense, they should have fairly consistent disease activity and less disease patient confounders. Like if some group, if it is added, that is deviating the total comparison between others, then those kind of things has to be reduced. So there should be less disease patient confounders and minimal interpatient variability. If it is like that, then we will get we can choose smaller sample size instead of a larger sample size. This is the major thing which we should be focused on clinical studies. And if you say totality of evidence, so a biosimilar development analytical parameters are more important, like these are the different parameters, and there should be some ranking system or scoring, like how much it is gaining in individual parameters. Then in an overall total, that is called totality of evidence, that direct comparison against the authorized or licensed reference product, this is considered for approval of this biosimilar. And about post-authorization activities, for any biopharmaceutical, clinical safety is ensured by continued pharmacovigilance. So the pharmacovigilance plan include collection and assessment of adverse effect data, post-approval studies and registries. A need for risk minimization strategies must be evaluated, and a risk management plan must be submitted. These are the post-authorization activities. And a few clinical indications of examples of biosimilars, like this filgrastim, infliximab, etanercept, adalimumab, and insulin glargine. So these are biosimilars developed against different innovative biologics like filgrastim, the Neupogen, and it is used as a supportive care, whereas infliximab, it is used in multiple inflammatory diseases. All these drugs are anti-TNF alpha agents, so they are used in multiple inflammatory diseases. And the insulin glargine is biosimilar to Lantus. It is indicated in type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And this is the last slide where I'm just listing out some instruments or techniques which are used for biosimilar testing. And these are the techniques which are mostly utilized for analytical development of biosimilars. And if anyone who's currently carrying out the studies, or students or scholars, if they get expertise or knowledge on these techniques, they will be having a huge value or scope in getting placed in the industries where biosimilars are being developed. So since I already told in the first or second slide that biosimilars are having a huge scope, and its market value or potential is growing like anything. So if it is if you develop some knowledge on these techniques, that sure you will fit into this biosimilar development program, so that the future is good. So I thank all the participants for your kind listening,